This is Matt once again from Real Talk and Business.
I graduated high school in the 90s. The 90s compared to now, it's like night and day, man. Now, you could be born after the 90s. You might have been born after when I graduated high school. You might have been born in the late 90s or early 2000s. If that's you, it's different. It's different now. Even all the cars now look the same. Back then, they were different. All unique. Had their own style. Now everything is the same, mostly. When I graduated high school, I could get a job, and if I didn't like that job, I can quit and then get another one. Just like that. That's how it was back then. When 2000 hit, after then, it started to go downwards, in a downward spiral to me. It just started to decline. It just started to go down around the 2000s to me. It wasn't even this much violence as what's going on now. It wasn't even like that back then. It was violence, of course, but not like how it is now. The cartoons were different. The movies were different. You know, I'm just so glad we can go back and check those out. I wouldn't know what to do if I couldn't do that. You can see the nonsense. When you compare this life, this current life, to back then, you can see the changes. I'm not saying this current reality is just totally terrible. Of course not. But to me, it's just different. It's just no comparison to me. Even people's attitudes were different back then. Now, even the people I knew back then, even they enjoyed that era. I don't recall anybody not liking the 90s era, late 80s. And what is missing is the essence. Now, the 70s and the 80s had their own thing. And then what I liked about the 90s and what I grew up in was that they took the 70s and 80s and made it more modernized, but they didn't lose the essence. They didn't lose the originality. It was still dope. As they say, it was still dope. I feel that this reality has lost the essence. It didn't carry the torch. And everything. The people I used to know back then, even now, even they are different, some of them. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I am homesick. There's things I do now, as far as making videos, that I don't think about it too much. But sometimes I just get an urge to just listen to this older music, watch older films, you know? And even when YouTube first started in 2006, even in that time frame was great too. Because back then, creators were just creating because they enjoy creating. Now it's just so many just trying to make $1 out of it. You know, back then it wasn't all about the dollar because they didn't even have that back then, where you can make revenue off of these videos. They didn't even have that. So it was just strictly based on the creativity of it, the content. It don't really move me like that, like it used to. That's why I like to go back in time whenever I can, you know, just to keep me at peace with this world and this reality. I like to go back in time and just get a feel of how the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, all of that back then. I like to get a feel of how that was. Put on a movie or something like that. I don't know what's going on. Even the people were different back then. Now, so many people are they're not the same. They're different too, you know. Hopefully things can change for the better. But we'll see. Yeah, I miss the 80s too, and the 90s. Especially the 90s because I was on my own as an adult then. I had got out of high school and learned how to be an adult and fend for myself. So I got to experience so much about life on my own. So that's why I say the 90s. But even the 80s too. I miss the 80s too. There's a lot about the 80s that I liked. I wish they had a time machine. Sign me up today. Today.
This is Matt from Real Talk and Business, and I see you in the next one.